My name's Colin Marshall. This is the Marketplace of Ideas. This week on the Marketplace of Ideas, entrepreneur and author Ben Casnocha. He's written a book called My Startup Life. He's here to talk about business, his life philosophy, and the value of on-demand education, the Economist, and much more.
You know, I think the most important learning anyone does is going to be after college, right? There's a lot of chatter about formal schooling and when people go through formal schooling, but the world's changing so quickly now that if you stop learning once you graduate from college, I mean, you're doomed. And so I'm always fascinated by adults who are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who have in some way continued their education. And they do that by seeking out kind of these on-demand education options, whether it's online courses or just reading lots of books or reading blogs or joining discussion forums with people, but just always every day, I mean, they wake up in the morning and ask themselves, will I go to bed smarter than what I was when I woke up? The most interesting insights occur at the intersection of ideas, cultures, and industries and disciplines. And that I know one person uses kind of the image of the T. We all need to be deep in one thing, but still, like the top of the T, be engaged and have an understanding of a lot of different things. I think it's huge because everything is related to something else. Mm-hmm. Everything is related to something else, and we need to be able to see those connections and understand those connections.
See also the Marketplace of Ideas podcast on iTunes. For my money, the easiest, most convenient way to subscribe to all the podcasts you love. Get the Marketplace every week by popping open your iTunes, going to the iTunes store, and searching for the Marketplace of Ideas. Here at the Marketplace of Ideas, we want to know where our listeners are to arrange for possible live appearances, to arrange for certain guests in certain places, or really anything. Visit our Frapper map online on our website, www.colinmarshallradio.com/marketplace, and click on the link that says, add yourself to our Frapper map here. It's very easy, just a couple clicks, and you can join the International Marketplace of Ideas listening community. So what are you reading? This is a regular segment on the Marketplace of Ideas where we find out from audience members, what are they reading? What do they want others to read? What should people just read in general? What's the essential canon of the listening audience? Let us know. Give us a call on the Marketplace of Ideas hotline. That is 805-585-3947. One more time, 805-585-3947. Leave a concise, preferably witty message telling us what's good about the book you're suggesting. Once again, that number is 805-585-3947. It's the Marketplace of Ideas listener hotline. You could be featured on the next show. My guest is Ben Casnocha, entrepreneur and, according to the cover of his book, My Startup Life, a speaker, optimist, CEO, teen, salesman, student, investor, dreamer, blogger, philosopher, strategist, writer, and road warrior as well. We're pleased to have him here. Ben, welcome to the Marketplace of Ideas.
Thanks, Colin.
Now, having founded your government services startup, Comcade, at 14, you're primarily known as an entrepreneur and a young entrepreneur at that, but you have a broader definition of the word than most do. You have a concept I really love called life entrepreneurship. What is that?
So most people, when they hear the word entrepreneur, think of someone who starts his or her own business. And while I think that's an accurate definition, certainly someone who starts his or her own business is an entrepreneur. It's not broad enough for me because I think all it means to be an entrepreneur is a commitment to being CEO of your own life, commitment to thinking entrepreneurially. So whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a college student or starting your own technology company, I think anyone can think entrepreneurially. They can apply those principles to their work, which means thinking creatively, challenging the status quo, trying to innovate, high energy, want to have impact on the world, not trying to follow the rules but invent the rules. All of those kinds of characteristics, I think, are what it means to think entrepreneurially, and I don't think it just has to be a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who thinks that way.
So what would a life entrepreneur way to approach a certain aspect of life be, as opposed to the way a non-life entrepreneur would handle it?
Well, I think taking my own situation of having just started college a month ago, what does it mean to think entrepreneurially about, say, going to college?
Yeah.
I think that anytime there's kind of an established rule book, namely, go to classes, work really hard at your classes, get good grades, please teachers, please authorities, read books, go through 4 years, get your degree, move on. It's a very passive approach. I think usually when we talk about the difference between life entrepreneurship and just kind of the textbook approach to life, there's passive versus active. I think an active entrepreneurial way to think about one's education would be very much to try to customize it, to try to personalize it, to reach out to professors you respect and develop a one-on-one relationship with them, to try to create interdisciplinary classes and majors and pursue a path that's going to be uniquely suited to you and your own strengths and interests versus kind of the generic college student.
So Go ahead.
It would mean networking and building personal relationships. I mean, entrepreneurs love meeting people because they know that surrounding yourself with smart people is the key to having impact on the world. And so, really emphasizing the importance of socializing, I think would be an entrepreneurial way to think about college. So I think there are a handful of principles that would apply in this situation. I think in any profession, especially education or teaching, there's a pretty stark contrast between someone who's kind of passive and following the rule book versus someone who's trying to think about it a little more creatively.
What sort of life entrepreneur moves have you made so far in your month at college? And you're at Claremont McKenna, just to clarify for the audience.
Yeah, I'm at Claremont McKenna College in Southern California, which is a small liberal arts college with a particular emphasis on government and public policy, which is an interest of mine. For me so far, I've worked hard to find the most interesting, smartest people on campus and develop a relationship with them. I know a lot of successful business entrepreneurs, people who create good companies, realize that, as I've observed, they realize that the key to starting a successful company is to find really, really good people to work with you on the idea. And kind of stealing from that playbook in college so far, I've just kind of concluded that I'll have the best experience if I can surround myself with the smartest, most interesting people on this campus. So whether it's emailing and cold calling professors or looking up students who have kind of weird and wacky backgrounds, I'm trying to do as much of that as possible. And so far, I've had a lot of really interesting lunches or dinners or meetings with people. And so I'm not as particularly concerned with the everyday classroom work as much as all the connections that are here and where those connections may lead in the future.
You've written on your blog a few times about the shortcomings of higher education and primary and secondary education as it's established now, especially in the U.S. And have you found any of the bad ideas you've had about that confirmed or more of them refuted by your actual experience?
My initial impression is that Claremont, like any selective college or university, is going to have a mix of both the good and bad attributes of American higher ed today. Fortunately, I think, given that it's like a highly selective liberal arts college versus maybe a state university or a place that's a little more strapped with cash, it has the flexibility to be a little more creative and a little better for students than it might otherwise be. But some of the good things, of course, are teaching students how to think about problems creatively and analytically, passing on just practical, good knowledge about the world, whether it's about history or psychology or sociology. I've found all of those things to be pretty true. I'm learning some interesting things by people who are at the top of their game, people who have spent their whole life studying a specific discipline and are now ready to tutor me in that discipline. The bad things, I think, are kind of too much of an emphasis on rote learning, too much of an emphasis on rule following. The system is still fundamentally organized to produce a generation of Ford factory workers, people who are going to get really, really good at working on the manufacturing line, whether literally or metaphorically,
Yeah.
as opposed to somebody who is ready to kind of like carve their own path and create their own company or their own future or whatever. So there's a little too much of that groupthink kind of, all right, professor tells you what to do, now go do it, as opposed to, professor tells you what to do, and then you have a conversation and challenge what he or she said and come to some kind of consensus, right? So those are some of the bad things, but we'll see. The jury's still out. So far, I've been actually pleasantly surprised, but maybe that will change over time.
In your book, you advocate on-demand education. Talk a little bit about that concept.
What I mean by that is, basically the most important, I think the most important learning anyone does is going to be after college, right? There's a lot of chatter about formal schooling and when people go through formal schooling, but the world's changing so quickly now that if you stop learning once you graduate from college, you're doomed. And so I'm always fascinated by adults who are late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who have in some way continued their education, and they do that by seeking out kind of these on-demand education options, whether it's online courses or just reading lots of books or reading blogs or joining discussion forums with people, but just always every day. They wake up in the morning and ask themselves, will I go to bed smarter than what I was when I woke up? And there are all sorts of interesting educational opportunities, opportunities to improve yourself that just weren't available 10 years before the internet. And I think adults who kind of see the importance in doing that are the ones who are succeeding.
You think in the 21st century, the eternal student is king?
That's a wonderful way of putting it.
I like that idea a lot. I'm looking forward to that future, and the present, really. It is the present. The eternal student has been king for a while, right?
I think so, and what's different now, though, is that the internet has made it much easier for anybody to be the eternal student. You no longer need to have access to famous university libraries. You don't need to even have very much money to go and buy books or go to a good college. Anybody has access to virtually every bit of knowledge that we've created on the internet. Wikipedia alone is just an amazing resource for somebody to learn about virtually anything. And so it's been a little more democratized. It's much easier for anybody to be the eternal student. So that means everyone has to be the eternal student plus more. They have to understand it at a level that other people can't, or they have to have some unique experience to supplement that common knowledge that will allow them to compete in what is being an increasingly competitive, globalized world.
As an avowed information addict myself, I'm on stuff like Wikipedia all day long almost, and I feel so sorry for everyone who lived before now.
Well, I think we are, and I feel extremely fortunate to be growing up in a time when Wikipedia and the internet are just the default. They're not new or different. It's the way the world's always been. But you're absolutely right. Obviously, that's not true, and we are extremely fortunate because of that.
Let's move a little bit back to the idea of the gap year. You're strongly in favor.
I am. I think I'm a big believer that people should take time when they're young to screw around. I think one kind of principle of thinking entrepreneurially, as we talked about earlier, is people who think entrepreneurial like to screw around, like to take risks, they like to have side projects, like to explore and experiment and expose themselves to randomness. And what gap year means, the concept that originally started in Britain, I think, but it's when students take a year off between high school and college to do any number of things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they travel, they read, they write, they sit around, they talk to people. But it's this idea of taking a break in your formal education to go and out into the real world and do something. And I did that, and I had an amazing time, and it really broadened my perspectives. And I hope to do more of the kind of random traveling, experimenting, working after college, because I think some of the very best ideas come in those kinds of experiences. And when you get older, my sense is that it's much, much harder to do those things once you have a family or a spouse or whatever.
Tell me about the value of traveling, specifically seeing the world, broadening your geographical horizons. I
think it's, I believe that every cliche about travel is true. So I think that people talk about, travel will broaden your perspective, and I think that's true. People say, you'll become more worldly and cultured, and I think that's true. I think what's also true is that if you're a young person in particular, if you're under 30 or whatever, you really have no choice not to understand the world. I think this is an interconnected global world, a global economy, and we need to understand how people in different parts of the world think and think about their lives and their work. And fortunately, travel's gotten much cheaper and easier than it's ever been before. Again, with the internet, you can price compare, you can plan itineraries, you can meet fellow travelers very, very easily. I can't imagine what it was like for my parents' generation traveling overseas and trying to plan all that stuff, over the phone or whatever. But I think it's essential, it's cheap, it's easy, and for someone who doesn't understand the world, I think they're not going to be able to participate in some of the more exciting business opportunities that involve multiple countries and people all over the world.
In what foreign countries that you've been to so far have you experienced the most personal change, the most self-development?
I think certainly those cultures and countries that are the most different from your own allow you to, or prompt you to reflect on who you are and what might be good or bad about who you are and what you believe in. I mean, I've been to places that are quite a bit different than America, like Russia, like China, India in some interesting ways, Japan, Western Europe I've been to, don't find it totally different from America. So, I think the more different the country, the more it prompts you to reflect and change. That's why I'm a big believer in people going to kind of out of the ordinary places to experience that.
I seem to recall you mentioning on the blog you very much enjoyed Switzerland.
If the question is, did Switzerland provide the most cultural change, the most self-reflection? Probably not.
It was enjoyable, though.
It's a very high quality of life. The food's amazing. The people are awesome. People are on time. But in terms of personal development and change, probably not that much.
On the blog you mentioned, it's part of what it's about is the intellectual life. And we mentioned a little bit about being the eternal student, but what to you is the intellectual life?
I think the intellectual life is a commitment to engage in the world of ideas, to constantly challenge and reflect on what's being presented to you, to think critically, to be kind of a skeptic, but to acknowledge the joy of learning and acknowledge the joy of debate and argument, and just kind of a more, again, a kind of an active engagement in the world of ideas, and not just kind of passively in taking what people tell you, and not just kind of reading a newspaper and accepting it all on face value, but really grappling with some of the toughest issues out there. And I think we all can do that. We don't have to be public intellectuals or academics to do that. We don't have to be the smartest person who will do that. But I think we need to give a shit. We need to care about what's going on, and that's what it means to me to kind of live an intellectual life.
Is living an intellectual life very much a rarity, or is it just uncommon, or how popular is currently the intellectual life as you describe it?
It's an interesting question because I think it's very common in kind of intellectual publications or intellectual newspapers for intellectuals to kind of bash pop culture, bash people who don't want to engage in the world of ideas and would rather sit passively in front of a TV and watch reality shows. Right? That's a very common kind of cultural critique, and the kind of pessimism around that is we see all the time. I'm not as pessimistic as that. I mean, I think it's actually more common than people would like to think, and I think it's actually easier now than it's ever been to engage. Like, you can read blogs by some of the most important academics around today. You can online interact with amazingly impressive people in their respective fields. I mean, it's much easier to kind of be part of that world than it was before. And I'm pretty optimistic that people my own age, kind of the youth generation, they like to have fun. They like to watch Laguna Beach and watch MTV and stuff like that. But they also see the value and see the value in kind of the more life of the mind. And again, because of the internet, they can kind of start scratching that itch much earlier than they used to be.
So you have hope for Gen Y intellectuals?
Absolutely. I think I was fortunate when I was traveling and just in all the people I've met in this, and when I was kind of promoting the book and so forth, I met so many interesting, extraordinary young people who just blew me away in their energy and creativity, and because of that, I'm just extremely optimistic about the people who are going to go on and lead, in government and business and the nonprofit world.
Now, you've written a lot about the intellectual life, and you've made a name for yourself in the business world. Give us your thoughts on seems to be a common perception that intellectual and business life are entirely separate paths and never the twain shall meet.
It's something I've thought a lot about because I think I've always found business kind of interesting, but also kind of not interesting, right?
Oh.
I mean, what it takes to be successful in business is not necessarily the same set of skills and attitudes that it takes to be successful in, say, academia or and certainly there are a lot of CEOs who, the reason they're successful CEOs is they don't have broad interests, they don't necessarily engage in the world of ideas, they're not, quote, intellectuals. What they've done is obsessively focused on their market, on their industry, on their company for the last 30 years. And so those people are not terribly interesting, they're not terribly intellectual, and the way we usually use that word, but they're very, very successful in their business effort. So I don't know if you can square the two. I think what I love about business is, and what I love about business people, is their desire to change the world and have impact on the world. Usually they do. I think starting a business is still one of the best ways to have massive impact on the world. Whereas, being a traditional intellectual in the way we think about it means a lot of kind of internal reflection, but not a lot of action. So I'm still dealing with how to grapple my kind of interest in both of those areas. But I think you're right. There is a little bit of a divide. I don't find the business world terribly intellectual.
What do you think about the idea that having many interests, a wide range of interests, pursuing many intellectual paths can help you in any given individual pursuit?
A huge believer in the value of being a mile wide and an inch deep. I think the most interesting insights occur at the intersection of ideas, cultures, and industries and disciplines. And that I know one person uses kind of the image of the T. We all need to be deep in one thing, but still, like the top of the T, be engaged and have an understanding of a lot of different things. I think it's huge because everything is related to something else. Everything is related to something else, and we need to be able to see those connections and understand those connections. And the most impressive people that I've met, the people who have gone on and been the most successful in whatever they're trying to do, see those connections and realize the value that, hey, even if you're running a software company, there's still something to be said for reading about, say, the Civil War in America. Or even if you're an artist, there's still something to be said for reading about artificial intelligence. Right? So I think it's really important to go deep in something that you're really good at, but also extend yourself. Because, again, we're living in an interconnected global world when a lot of things are overlapping, and we need to see where those overlaps are and how we can take advantage of them.
Did those people you just mentioned, encountering them, talking to them, exchanging ideas, were they the ones that convinced you of the idea that the connections are the important things?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I think whether it's now, whether it's current business people who had their foot in the world of banking and had their foot in the world of technology and could see the overlap and see the opportunity in those two disciplines and how you could start a company that would solve the problems in the other, or whether it was like the Medici family back in the day. I mean, I think a lot of people, they know that some of their best ideas have come when they kind of take two things they're working on and put them next to each other, and they're seemingly different, but they see a strand of connection, they see a commonality, and they pursue it.
You've got a fascinating project called the Silicon Valley Junto. Tell us what that is.
Silicon Valley Junto is modeled around the junto that Ben Franklin started back in the day, which was Ben Franklin and 12 of his buddies convened every week for an hour to talk about issues of worldly importance. And it was kind of a self-help group also. They discussed how they could help one another and what ideas people were thinking of and what projects people were working on. So the Silicon Valley Junto is modeled on that in the sense that once a quarter we bring together business and technology executives, people who in some sense think or speak the same language, and we bring them together to talk about kind of non-stereotypically business and technology things. So we talk about happiness, we talk about love, we talk about death and mortality. We talk about a variety of things, and it's kind of to exercise, different mental muscle. Like when you live in kind of a very focused industry, you spend all day thinking about what your company's doing. It's kind of refreshing to think outside that box, and we do it for the reasons we've just been talking about. Because I do think there's a benefit to thinking about topics outside of your little tunnel vision niche, and so far it's been very, very successful. And people have a good time, and also they feel like it's worth their time. It's worth taking time out of the day to think about these kind of non-obvious things.
And that adds an extra dimension. It's not just trying to make connections by oneself, but there's multiple people from multiple walks of life coming together, and talk about the value of that. People from different roads coming together in conversation. I
think it's one of the things I enjoy most.
Me too.
I have a lot of personal intrinsic pleasure out of talking to those kinds of people. and I would also argue, like I think a lot of people would acknowledge that it's pleasurable, but I think fewer would argue that there's actually a value add in terms of, like, I think it can allow you to go and do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. So for me, I think I like nothing more than meeting somebody who thinks differently, is from a different part of the world, and doing something totally random that I have maybe not too much of an interest in, but having an hour conversation with that person really expands my own imagination and allows me to think of things that I wouldn't have thought of before. And even I love meeting somebody who's doing something with their life that I've never even thought of. Like like most people have only heard of 5 or 6 career paths, right? Doctor,
fireman.
They've constructed a life that's so idiosyncratic and unique. It inspires me. It fires me up.
What issues in your mind have meeting these very different people changed? What have you changed your mind about as a result? Or what perspective of yours has altered as a result in a major sense? Like, have there been any? Really?
I think one is that optimism reigns. I think in all the people I've met, I found that the optimists, the people who believe that tomorrow will be better than today, are usually more effective, usually more happy, usually more successful. I've learned that in all the different people I've met, I've learned that they all have a commitment to personal growth. Like, they're never done learning. They're, as you said, the eternal students. I think they all basically believe that people are good. Maybe this is the optimist thing, but they think people are fundamentally out to help you, not hurt you. And they have trust that, maybe a random meeting with a stranger who reads your blog or something, maybe that will turn out to be a bad use of the hour, but maybe not. Yeah. Maybe they're a really good and interesting person, and that kind of randomness of the interaction will be really valuable. So they're kind of open to new things, and they're generally trusting of new people and new ideas, and of course they trust but verify, right? There's kind of the skepticism, but they're open to expanding their mind, not closed in what they always believe or the people they always spend time with.
A healthy skepticism.
Yes, exactly.
About the value of optimism, were you always an optimist, or did you learn your optimism?
I think a little of both. I think as a young person, we're supposed to be a little more optimistic than other parts of society. And indeed, I think optimism kind of gets beaten out of us as we get older. We become more jaded. We get burned. A friend betrays us. All of those things contribute to kind of growing more cynical. And I think cynicism can be important, don't get me wrong, but I think just as a young person, there's kind of this expectation that you're going to see the future as bright and sunny, and kind of fill that expectation. And for me, just like as Picasso or somebody said, we're all born artists, and we become un-artists when we get older. I'm hoping that doesn't happen to me. I hope that I can always kind of cultivate that naive mind that so characterizes young people, and carry that with me through adulthood.
This is an issue I've had many discussions about, and I'd like to get your take. Must one deceive oneself to maintain optimism?
This is indeed an interesting question, one I blog a little bit about, but it's this whole idea of self-deception. I actually think that self-deception is important for happiness. I think most of the happiest people I've met are dupe themselves a little bit in their own intelligence, their own impact, their generosity. They think higher of themselves than they probably are. They attribute failures to happenstance. They attribute successes to talent. So they are pretty good. I mean, they're not totally disconnected from reality in the sense that they're like a chicken that their head cut off. but they do recognize that if you're totally honest with yourself about who you really are and what your importance to the world. I mean, like we're all the smallest of small dots in the map of human history. I mean, most of our lives are going to be totally insignificant. But if you stare that reality in the face, it's easy to kind of get depressed and not care as much. So I do think self-deception is somewhat important certainly for happiness. And if to the extent that happiness is connected with your ability to have impact, I think self-deception is important to go and have impact and be successful.
For those just tuning in, my guest is Ben Casnocha, young entrepreneur and author of My Startup Life. So this is a small degree of self-deception, not quite.
I think it's a small degree, right? I mean, too much, and you become too disconnected from reality.
You have mentioned the value, I believe, once of tricking yourself. Is there an example from your life of something you've tricked yourself about, and that's been a way you've accomplished a goal? Or a contributing factor, not a total way.
Sure. I mean, I think I've had a lot of small examples of times when, like maybe in the first sales first deal I might have closed as I was a salesperson for my own company. You know, maybe I attributed that to like an outstanding presentation I did rather than kind of a weird political circumstance that forced the customer to buy our product. but by attributing that to my own presentation skills, and increased my self-confidence in my presentation skills and allowed me to do a better job the next time and even do a better presentation the time after that. And so like a little self-deception, that example can go a long way towards improving my self-confidence and allowing me to do better. So I don't. Nothing huge jumps out, but you know, I always believe that like life and successes and failures consist of a lot of little things. I think little things like that, like I could have totally attributed that sales success to randomness and luck. The fact that I felt good about myself and felt good about my presentation ability helped me and inspired me to continue to want to get better at it and continue to do a better job the next time around.
Speaking of randomness, you have advocated embracing randomness in a certain way, and what rationale led you to that conclusion that randomness should be embraced?
I think what led me to that conclusion, and it's not all my conclusion, there are a lot of people who talk about randomness and talk about luck and statistical uncertainty and that kind of thing, especially vis-a-vis financial markets. But for me, you know, if I like reflect over the last few years and some of the best things that have happened to me, I realize that a lot of the best things that have happened to me were not necessarily the result of some specific effort or some specific goal I had in mind. Rather, it was kind of a random interaction, a random experience, something that kind of fell out of the sky. And by being able to jump on that and acknowledge the potential in that random interaction or random experience, really good things happened. And so it kind of, this thought came from kind of I kind of got more humble about my ability to predict which of my efforts were going to be successful, and I got more humble in my ability to trust in a plan that I had set up. And like thinking about like my gap year and some of the things that I did when I was traveling or writing the book, like those were pretty random things. And had I not just wandered down the street in Shanghai and met a guy who happened to be working in kind of a similar industry, I would have never had dinner with his family later that night, and I wouldn't be friends with him as I am now. So, so needing to be open to those experiences is what I'm all about, and that's kind of the root of it. And I still believe that we should make a concerted effort. You know, I have a friend, a mentor of mine, who once every 2 weeks has a, quote, random day when he does phone calls and emails with kind of random people he doesn't know where it's going to lead. Maybe it's a waste of a day, maybe it's not, but he tries to pack all of these random interactions into one day and see what happens.
So that's one of your mentors, and you've written quite a bit about the concept of mentors and the mentors you have and how you position your mentors. What use do you make in your life of mentors?
I think the support network is absolutely essential. I think enlisting the support of others, surrounding yourself with bigger brains and bigger souls is really important, and especially if you're a young person who doesn't know what you're doing, like me. Like I still don't know what I'm doing, a lot of things I'm doing. And when I started my company, I had no real business experience, and there wasn't a lot of business experience in my family when it comes to startup technology, so I really needed to reach out to people who could help me. And I think, no matter what your age or no matter what point in your career you are, there's always somebody who can help you in some aspect of that. And so I think it's really about being proactive and reaching out to people. I mean, what I've learned is people love helping other people. People love giving advice. And if you're open to hearing it, if you ask for it, it will come in bundles.
Do you find there's an inherent value in simply surrounding yourself or getting in close proximity to people who are successful?
Yes, I do, but I think of course I do, but I think there's also something to be said for surrounding yourself and talking to people who aren't as successful as they would like. I think people spend probably far too much time studying success stories and reading about success and writing about success, as opposed to studying things that were supposed to work out but didn't. Studying the person who was supposed to be really successful but wasn't, and trying to understand what happened there. I think those can be really valuable as well.
What common threads have you found in these non-success stories?
It's hard to tell. There isn't one single theme that runs throughout. Some of them are pretty obvious, like he or she wasn't persistent enough, gave up after a year and trying to start that company, or maybe was off the charts from an IQ perspective. I mean, had intellectual horsepower that few people have, but no social skills, kind of arrogant, no emotional intelligence, couldn't bond with anyone, right? I mean, those I see that a lot actually. I've met a lot of amazingly smart people, but they just can't build the social relationships required to do anything of great importance. I mean, if you want to build an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or business, whatever, You need people to be on your team. And if you can't do that, it won't be successful no matter how smart you are.
The network is a necessary condition then.
Absolutely.
Comment on the finding that exceptional adult achievers often recall formal schooling as a disliked distraction.
The average GPA of self-made millionaires in America is a 2.6. I think, like, if you ask a lot of people who are really good doers now in the real world, and I've met some of them, I don't claim to have met, like, every single person in this category, but I've met a lot of people who have, like, done a lot of interesting things. I asked them about their educational experience, and there are some good memories, but a lot of bad memories around the necessity the necessity and focus on kind of rote learning and rote memorization and kind of the opportunity cost of being tied down in one place for 4 years. And a lot of them had quite a bit of fun in college, but they think from a kind of thinking skills perspective, it wasn't worth the financial or opportunity cost required to get that. Usually in the real world, what it takes to be effective and successful is kind of like obsessive focus on something for some short period of time to have impact. And school really never allows you to dive deep in anything. I mean, you're constantly trying to balance a lot of different subjects at once. You're constantly trying to please all these different constituencies like professors, and you're doing this all in an environment that's very, very kind of certain, right? There's not a lot of uncertainty in college. There's a schedule, you have classes, you show up, you're in a campus bubble. Whereas in the real world, it celebrates people who can thrive on uncertainty, thrive on that randomness, and kind of be self-starters and not always have to have someone looking over your shoulder. So I think that's why, whether it's kind of history's famous examples like Ben Franklin, who had only 2 years of formal schooling, to more modern-day people like Bill Gates or Michael Dell. I mean, I think a lot of people see it more as a distraction and waste of time. It doesn't mean that's right for everybody. I mean, not everybody can be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We need the cogs in the machine, right? We need followers. Not everyone can be leaders. But to the extent that one thinks that he fits kind of the different mold, I'm not sure that the formal schooling system, at least in America, is the best path for him.
You've put a great deal of thought into the choice between real-life university, as it's been called, and actual university. Describe that process.
When I was in high school, nearing the end of my high school years, I was trying to decide what to do next. I mean, the next logical step was we'll go to college. But I also, as we've discussed, had these other yearnings and had some negative beliefs about how this kind of formal schooling system was set up, and kind of constructed this idea that I called real-life university, which was premised on the idea that, okay, I need to get an education. I don't deny that. I don't think I know everything I need to know. I still need to do a lot of learning and want to devote 4 years of my life to learning. I think that's important. But I don't think the only way that has to happen is in a traditional university. So I had this idea of traveling for 2 years, going to conferences, reading 100 books a year, forming a circle, like a quote-unquote board of trustees, mentors, and advisors, and devoting 4 years to get an education, but in a very kind of entrepreneurial and idiosyncratic way. And that was kind of a concept that I created and studied and thought about. But as I went through the college admissions process, I visited a variety of well-known research universities down to kind of more obscure liberal arts colleges, and came to the belief that the one thing that real-life universities do not provide, that a traditional college university does, is the concentration of age-similar peers in one environment. So what college gives me and gives most people is, several thousand 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds all living together, all interacting with one another, all building relationships that are valuable both in the present and in the future. And that I just think I could not figure out a way to replicate that in a real-life view. So that was kind of a main driver for me to come to college. I don't know if I'll last all 4 years, but I decided to pick a college that would give me that would be uniquely suited to my strengths and interests, and I think the Claremont McKenna College and the Claremont colleges more generally are like that. And we'll see how it goes. But I definitely am still a little conflicted, but for now I've made the choice that the social opportunities here are just too good to pass up.
Have you thus far been able to tap into what you can in a month of a community of young intellectuals?
I think so. Again, it's still early, but I think there are a lot of really driven, smart, interesting students here, and more important, professors who are really devoting themselves to their discipline, to their topic, and having the opportunity to study with them to study like a founding document, like a Constitution, Declaration of Independence, with someone who spent years thinking about every word in that document is pretty rewarding, pretty stimulating.
Now, I'm about the same age as you. I just graduated college, a few months ago. And so I'm interested in seeing what our generation is doing intellectually. What have been your impressions of our generation of intellectuals as they're developing that you've seen?
I think that it's hard to generalize. I mean, they're all different kinds of people, and I think we're seeing a lot more individuality amongst each person. As again, with the web, you can tap into any kind of community, and it's easier to construct your own life and explore kind of random interests. Like there's a community around everything, right? If you have the most obscure niche interest around, like a certain kind of doll or something, you can find people all over the world who have that same passion and develop that passion with them. So I see like a lot of the people I've met are able to pursue what used to be kind of obscure, off the beaten path interests and develop them. And that's really exciting. Beyond that, I mean, I think they also are really good at kind of developing communities and growing into communities. Like I think this whole idea of support network is common to people who like thinking, because brainstorming with other people really develops your ideas. And it's rare for me to come across somebody who's like really smart and interesting and doing cool things, but it's pretty isolated, right? Doesn't know very many people.
Yeah.
Usually, like the more smart and interesting person you are, you kind of reach out to other people and develop a community of those people and tap into the network, whether it's virtual or in person. But they want to engage with other people to advance their ideas.
Would you call this the age of, and forgive the terminology, the connected geek rather than the isolated geek?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, absolutely. I think we're more connected than we've ever been. I
see. Who are some of your favorite thinkers, just in general, of what you've read? Who currently influences you the most?
There are a lot of people I admire and look up to, depending on the topic.
I see.
There are everybody in kind of the traditional academic atmosphere. There are professors like Richard Posner at the University of Chicago, or Tyler Cohen at George Mason University.
Of course,
to more eccentric writers like Michael Lewis or David Foster Wallace or Joan Didion, to New York Times columnist David Brooks, to professors I have here at Claremont, to venture capitalists who I respect on business issues and life issues. So there's a range of people. I don't bow down to any one person. I don't have like a hero or something. But depending on the area, there are people I go to and look to for wisdom and inspiration.
Now, I was going to ask you about a couple of those names you mentioned just now, so perfect. You're a fan of David Foster Wallace. I am actually a fan of his journalism as well. I enjoy his fiction less, but I've been talking to some people in interviews over the last week, coincidentally, about David Foster Wallace, and he seems to be pretty disliked among a lot of literature enthusiasts, but I like his journalism, and you seem to love it as well. What do you think he has?
I think with David Foster Wallace, I mean, I think it's good if you have both critics and fans, right? If you're not pissing somebody off, you're probably not being provocative enough. But they are different, right? I would agree that I like his kind of nonfiction better than his fiction. But he has a distinctive style, right? His trademark shtick is he goes and immerses himself in an environment and describes it really, 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 really well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that is a unique skill. Very few people can go into even an ordinary environment and describe it with such richness and excitement that it makes someone want to read several pages about it. And of course, he's also brilliantly broad. He's brilliant, and he's brilliantly broad in his taste and understanding. I mean, he's a math major. Has written a lot about mathematics and kind of mathematical science, as well as an athlete and tennis player and a fan. So he can again see these connections, and he can draw analogies and parallels across a variety of disciplines. That's a rarity, and as far as most journalists go.
I don't know if you read it, but I loved his book on infinity, everything and more, and I never expected it from him.
I haven't read that one, but I've read about it, and that's actually what I was referring to when it comes to mathematics. But that shows his range. I mean, it's pretty impressive to be able to talk intelligently about that as well as go deep on something like lobsters or
Yeah, or the Adult Entertainment Expo, or the cruise
That's right.
ship. Yeah, all that.
That was one of my favorite. One of his favorite essays on the Adult Entertainment Expo.
Yeah, I got to say, given the choice between the cruise ship and the Adult Entertainment Expo, it's tough to say. I don't know which one I lean toward.
Yeah, he has a lot of classics, and in fact, he's edited the new anthology of Best American Essays 2007, which comes out in a couple weeks. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about that. Now, as far as the other names you mentioned, you didn't mention him, but you've expressed enthusiasm for P.G. O'Rourke's writing, and you mentioned David Brooks. What's your connection to the humorous conservative?
Well, I think I love people who are humorous. I mean, I think writing funny and smart is hard. I'm not as good at that as I would like to be. It's easy to be funny and dumb or smart and dull, but funny and smart is hard. And Brooks and O'Rourke are good at that. They also kind of like the whole conservative. I mean, a lot of kind of liberal writers and funny liberals. It's always kind of it's a different brand of cynicism.
That's true.
Brooks is kind of an optimist, but like he makes fun of people, but in kind of in an amusing way, in a way that doesn't make them feel. It doesn't make me feel too bad about the people who are being insulted. And our work too makes fun of a ton of people. If you read any of his stuff, he insults people left and right. But it's one that's kind of a respectful insult, I feel. So I think I don't know if it has to do with them being conservative, but they've definitely achieved the right balance. It's kind of like being provocative, being funny, being insulting, but not too much.
Yeah, I love both of their works. I mean, I've read the whole P.G. O'Rourke canon multiple times over. His book on The Wealth of Nations was great, because I've read the original, and I don't know, have you caught that? His book on the wealth?
I saw he's written his own take on it. I haven't read it yet. Was it good?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it's short, too, so I would definitely recommend that to you. You got to put that on your list, and Everything and More from Wallace, and two more on what I'm sure is a very, very long reading list that you already have going.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, speaking of things political, you have been called a libertarian. How much do you agree with that label?
I agree with it to a certain extent. I don't like labels. Most people don't.
Yeah.
But I agree with it to a certain extent. I mean, I believe that an individual's freedom should be placed at the center of a government's concerns, and that we all have a kind of sovereign conscience and sovereign body, and we should do what we want. And the government has no right to say what goes on in our bedroom or what goes on in our lives or what goes on in our wallet. Those are things that we should decide. So I kind of like the general philosophy of what it means to be libertarian. Obviously, at a practical level, I mean, libertarian party is non-effectual. So you have to choose if you want your vote to mean anything. if it means anything, you have to choose Democrat or Republican. Unfortunately, neither party really espouses the libertarian view in a way that would excite me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you politically, almost identically. Did you come to your views from further to the right or further to the left? Or did you kind of spring up toward the middle did you come directly to the middle?
I came more from the left. I mean, I grew up in San Francisco, and I'm still pretty socially liberal, so I like what the Democratic Party stands for in many ways, but yeah, more from the left.
Let's talk about information diets. What sources of information do you consume on a regular basis?
I'm an information junkie. I consume books, magazines, 500 RSS feeds.
Oh.
I don't read those every day, but I have about 60 I read every day. And I had conversations with people. I mean, a broad diet, but I'm trying to cut down on my daily intake and focus. Like, daily newspaper I still like. I like the LA Times, like the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, etc. But I'm trying to do more of a weekly and monthly check-in on kind of current events.
Oh,
I love The Economist or the Atlantic Monthly or Harper's or other monthly magazines that kind of give perspective. That's how I'm kind of keeping up. It's hard to keep up on a day-to-day basis. I
personally am an addict of The Economist as well. What is it that draws you to The Economist?
Its breadth.
Yeah.
It's the quality of its writing. Its political persuasion, which I would consider slightly right of center. It's the fact that it's British. There are a lot of things. Its humor, its sense of irony. I like all of those things.
Yeah, I try to explain it to a lot of my friends why I'm so devoted to this magazine they always see me with, and I give similar answers to yours, but I haven't worked in the British thing yet. Maybe they'll understand if I say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what to you are the essential elements of life, your necessities, factors you have to have in place? But beyond food and shelter and whatnot.
Well, I mean, for what I learned is what I actually materially need to be effective and happy is essentially some clothes and my computer.
Yeah.
That's what I learned when I was traveling. I just don't need much beyond that. And of course, books always help. I'm not sure yet. I mean, I'm still like I believe that the pursuit of happiness is the most important pursuit there is, and I think about like the question you just asked in that context. Well, what makes me happy?
Yeah.
People I like, spending time with, people I love. People are really important to me. So being with people would be an essential, a necessity for me to lead a happy life. And beyond that, I'm not really sure.
That's a good way to put it, because then you're not too locked into absolutes that you have to have, or you'll go nuts without.
Yeah.
So, back to the book, My Startup Life. You describe your rise to a pretty widely recognized name you've become. You describe going on television shows, doing interviews about Comcade, and being essentially a young high school entrepreneur. And what interested me, and what very much surprised me, was that you described receiving hate mail after doing these appearances, one of which said memorably something like, "Go to hell and get alive." Are you serious? You get these?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Not as much anymore, but there are nut jobs out there, right? I mean, you can't take it too seriously, but I think any time you do something that affects somebody, there are going to be people on the pro and people on the con side. And again, if you're not getting any criticism for what you're doing, you're probably not doing enough.
No.
So it would always kind of sting sometimes to get those criticisms, but in the end, it was probably validation that what I was doing, had an effect on somebody.
What do you think that the people who, besides the crazy ones, the one who were reacting to you with a negative attitude, actually had against you?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it was because they didn't think they didn't like the specific work I was doing, the specific ideas I was propagating. Maybe they were jealous. Maybe they thought they were better. Who knows? I really have no idea. That's
true. It could be anything. So, what are you reading right now, out of curiosity?
Let's see. I had to read Plato's Republic for a philosophy class.
Oh, yes.
I'm reading for personal reading a new book by Mark Penn, a Clinton advisor, called Micro Trends: The Small Forces Behind Tomorrow's Big Changes. He's the guy that's coined soccer moms and other.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. That's right.
Many demographic bubbles. So that's kind of interesting. And I have obviously a bunch of other. I just read this book, Art of Political Warfare, which compared military imagery and politics to military strategy and history. So a lot of different stuff.
It sounds like you're keeping the information flowing. I hope you always do. Ben Casnocha, thank you very much for coming on the Marketplace of Ideas.
Thanks a lot, Colin.
Visit Ben Casnocha on the web. He has a blog at ben.casnocha.com. That's ben.casnocha.com. Also visit the site of his book, My Startup Life, at mystartuplife.com. All of the Marketplace of Ideas music is produced by Ben Althouse. Check out his website, benalthouse.com. That's BenAlthouse. He's also been known to go under the names Ice Ben and DJ Concept. Check out his grooves on benalthouse.com. Feel free to leave your comments, questions, and reading suggestions for the audience on the Marketplace of Ideas listener hotline. The phone number is 805-585-3947. That's 805-585-3947. Be sure to check out our website, www.colinmarshallradio.com/marketplace. All feedback, please direct to colin@colinmarshallradio.com, and we hope to see you soon on the next episode of the Marketplace of Ideas. Bless the child that could bite his own.